Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining to this webinar where we will be talking about the fundamentals of AWS security. My name is Esteban Hernandez, and I'm a Specialist Solutions Architect for Security and Compliance covering the EMEA region. First, before we start, some housekeeping rules or ideas. A copy of the content that we'll be reviewing has been made available through the handout section. If you have questions, you can do this, make them at any point in time during the presentation. And to post your questions, use the question section. And this session will be recorded, and this recording will be sent to you when this becomes available. So let's get started. So what happens when customers move to AWS? Well, what happens is that they automatically can strengthen their security posture. And this is because they inherit the global security and compliance controls that we have deployed. Cloud is a leveling technology. That means that the same requirements and controls are applied for the highest regulated industries can also be applied to startups that are just exploring or starting to build a new product. All of this is made available to these customers equally. They also benefit from the scale of our services and elasticity, and we also offer visibility like never before by having visibility of API calls that are made to the platform through services like AWS CloudTrail. We also offer the highest standards for privacy and data security. For us customers that are based in Europe, things like GDPR are very important. So our services were GDPR ready when it became in enforcement mode. And as proponents of automation, we believe that we have an important job to secure one of the most scarce resources in a security function, and this is the security engineers. So that's why many of our services provide already built automations or automations that you can create so you can maximize the value of your analysts and engineers. And of course, we benefit from having one of the largest network of security partners and solutions. So you can keep working with solutions that you might be already familiar with and you want to continue working with. But let's start from the beginning. So you open an AWS account and you might wonder, now what? How can I secure it? Well, you might start by setting up a strong password for the root account. As part of that process, you might also want to enforce MFA on the root account. However, the whole idea of this is that you shouldn't be using the root account to manage your account. We offer a service called AWS IAM, which is Identity and Access Management, and we will need to create individual users here using the principle of least privilege, so you can have only the privileges and permissions that they need to do the task that the user was intended for. Initially, we will need to create an individual IAM user with administrative rights to configure the account for the purposes that we want. And of course, also the AWS account is the highest level of isolation that you can find on the AWS ecosystem. Depending on your requirements, you might decide that a single account is fit for your own purpose, but many of our customers decide to go into have a multi-account strategy, where each of these accounts have a specific purpose, and it benefits from having that isolation, and each single account will have its own IAM user credentials. When we talk about IAM, this service has a global context. That means that it's not necessarily attached to a specific region. There are other services that are like this, services like CloudFront or the AWS console itself. It's important to understand the anatomy of an AWS account because that will help us to understand how to protect it or how to reduce the scope of the things that we need to protect. As we go deeper, then we understand that we have different regions. And all of these regions are available within the AWS account. And these regions will contain services within that context. When we talk about regions, well, whenever you place your content, your data into this region, this content is not going to be removed without your authorization. And we have 20 regions across the globe with 60 availability zones. When we talk about availability zones, we talk about what we call a customer equivalent of a data center. And why a customer equivalent is because many of our availability zones can be either one or several buildings. All of these have different risk profiles, and it's one of the constructions that you can use to have highly available applications. We have more and more regions coming in Bahrain, Cape Town, Hong Kong, and Milan. And starting with Hong Kong, we will change a little bit the behavior of how these regions are available. That means that once these are released, you will have to opt in to use the services in that region, as opposed to the way it is now, where all of the regions are available to the account. We're talking that it's a leveling technology, and we have a broad range of compliance regimes that we use to meet the purposes and requirements of many of our customers. Whether you have to comply with ISO 27001 because it's a security framework that you have decided to implement, or maybe you have an interest in ISO 27017 for security in the cloud, or 27018 for privacy of information in the cloud. Or perhaps your workloads require you to handle cardholder data, and in that case, you will be interested in using PCI compliance services. So we cover all of these different regions and make this available to our customers. However, these regions and station of compliance and different things are assessed by a third-party auditor. That means that you don't have to trust only in our word that we're doing things in a certain way. All of these are reviewed by independent auditors, and the outcome of those reviews are made available to our customers, either in the way of a certification that has been achieved, a specific audit report, or maybe an attestation of compliance, as it is in the case of PCI. Of course, we not only provide this set of compliance reports and certifications that we make available to our customers to understand what we call as the security of the cloud. We also provide a series of AWS functionality and features that enable our customers to improve their security posture and to comply with their own requirements. How we make these different assets available to our customers is through a service that we call AWS Artifact. AWS Artifact is accessible directly through the AWS console. Things like certifications, in the case of ISO, are immediately accessible. Other compliance reports, due to the nature of the information, are accessible after going through an NDA, click-through NDA. What we enable with this is that customers have control to continuously monitoring the state of the security of the cloud, understanding what's the latest version of the report, access this whenever they want, make continuous assessments and quick assessments, and we want to keep transparency so customers can do their own risk assessment of the infrastructure. Once we go down a level there, we'll start seeing that the services that are contained within the context of a region, we have things that we call, we have something that we call VPC, which is a virtual private cloud, which represents a networking environment that is controlled by customers. Here, you will deploy things like EC2 instances. Maybe you will deploy a database using our RDS, Relational Database Service, or maybe you want to exploit data by using our EMR service. Here you will have control over the networking and using things like security groups and network access control list. There are services that are more akin to managed services. These abstracted services don't live within the context of a VPC. They live outside it, and that means that we're taking more on the responsibility and configuration and security of this. Because in the cloud, everything is a shared responsibility. So we have the shared responsibility model to understand better where the responsibilities of the configuration lie. For example, AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud. That means that we're responsible for the security of physical environments, the data centers, how the networking works between these, the hypervisor and the compute that it's put in place, and the database and storage that is used by the systems. When we talk about the security in the cloud, that's the responsibility side of our customers. That means that our customers are in the best place to determine what's the right level of encryption that they want to use in transit and at rest, whether they want to allow specific services or specific instances to talk to each other. They will have control over the networking, firewall, and patches and versions of operating systems, and how all of this is authorized and built together. And of course, on top of all of that is the customer content, which is the most important bit. When we talk about the shared responsibility model in the context of compliance, we said that, and we showed that we have a very big and comprehensive compliance program where we describe all of the security of the cloud and the customers can use to make on their own risk model. However, for our customers to achieve their own compliance objectives, it will need to be put together with the security in the cloud. That means that that network configuration that has been put in place, how your process for keeping systems up to date, how you handle information, will have to play together with the security of the cloud so customers can achieve certifications like SOC, maybe ISO 27001, or whatever requirement that you have in this case. That's because the scope of responsibility depends on the type of service that you pick, because not all services are created equal. In this case, this is a broad way of describing the services. The first shared responsibility model that I show represents more the infrastructure services. These infrastructure services run in the context of VPC most of the time, and that's because you keep control of the networking firewall, the version of operating system, patching, what the applications are deployed there, and then you will control access in a combination of AWS IAM service, and maybe you will have your own bespoke authorization process, or maybe you have AD and you're using that to provide some identity, and on top of that is the data. Then if you consider things like container services, here we can refer to container services as EKS or Kubernetes, but we also mean things like RDS itself. So in RDS, it's going to be deployed in the context of your virtual private cloud. You will control the firewall, so which instances can communicate with this database instance. But then you don't have to worry about the operating system. You don't have to worry about patching. All of that is done for you as part of the service. As we move into a higher level of service and the managed services, you don't have to worry about any of this because you will be consistently applying permissions and access to information by using AWS IAM. Because in short, what's really important is that your data is your data and you decide who can access it and how. So that's why we provide fine-grained permissions so you can achieve this. As part of that, we also offer a broad range of security solutions. We have categorized these according to the 5 security epics of the cloud adoption framework. And we start by telling a story. So we will start discussing that you have all of these services and that you need to create individual users, and you do that by using IAM, and that's the identity bit. IAM is going to be the most widely used service that you have, but maybe you would want to grant identity services for one of your applications, and then you can do something like Amazon Cognito for that. As you move along the security story, you will want to have visibility and detection of anomalous behaviors. For that, we have a series of detective controls, either using things like Amazon Guard Duty or CloudTrail to monitor and recording different API calls. Once we move into infrastructure security, we have mentioned that this is all in the context of a VPC. You will have a series of services to help consistently track the configuration of services and configuration that is deployed maybe to an EC2 instance, achieve high availability with protection against DDoS attacks, or have your vulnerability management program by using something like Amazon Inspector. Once we reach the data, one of the best controls to implement is encryption. So we provide a series of services to help with the encryption configuration of encryption in transit and encryption at rest. Things like AWS Certificate Manager will help to create and lifecycle the management of certificates, and KMS, which is our key management service, will help us to provide ubiquitous encryption in different services. And finally, but you can use things like AWS config rules or AWS Lambda to create your own remediations whenever you find an event that was expected or not expected, and then you need to take action. Talking about identity and access management, I would like to explain this bit because I think it's very interesting. When we talk about access control in the cloud, we need to think about two different planes. The first one is the control plane. The control plane is the set of API calls that you make to maybe start an instance, create it, shut it down. In the case of EC2, the start instance is the example that we have here. But if you want to connect to that instance, then you will need to set up something like Secure Shell or Remote Desktop to gain access to the inside of that instance and then make changes to configuration. So what you will find is that these two have different paths, different credentials, and different protocols. And this is clearly defined. They don't exchange each other. However, we have other services like Amazon DynamoDB. And in this case, these two intertwine. So you will have that the control plane to create a table, it will be the same that the data plane that will use to access the information that has been created in that table. So that means that this will have the same path, the same credentials, and the same protocol. In order to control that, we make use of AWS IAM, Identity and Access Management, and it provides a series of familiar concepts to control access to your AWS environment. So you will have users that we will consider as principals, and then you can use things like groups, roles, and policies to grant these permissions. It provides a clear separation between authentication and authorization, and it also enables cases like federation into the account, where you can handle the authentication, the identity part, in an identity provider, and use things like SAML or any federation capabilities to federate into the AWS account. For the cases where you decide to have more than one account, it also is very useful to provide cross-account access. If you already have an identity provider and you would like to continue using it, we have a service that is called the AWS Directory Service that provides different options. Things like Simple ID, in case you want to provide a way for applications to authenticate in a simple way, or perhaps you already have an existing Microsoft AD service, and you would like to have a managed version of that in the cloud, where you can create a trust relationship between the two of them, or have it completely isolated from your environment. This is part of the container services, where you will not be responsible for managing the operating system and patching, but you will be completely in control of what permissions are set to provide the identity and access to the services that you want. Or perhaps you already have an identity, a Microsoft AD, you just want to relay authentication to that one. In that case, you will use things like AD connector to provide authentication to your operating systems and applications back to your on-premise AD. If we move to detective controls, you can use things like AWS config. AWS config is pretty much an asset management service. It helps you to understand what assets have been deployed in your AWS account and how changes in configuration have happened. So you will have a history of the configuration changes, and whenever there is a change, you can get notifications from them. It also has a second part called AWS config rules. That is a series of precompiled rules that can help you track compliance of the desired state versus what is the current configuration. Things like having CloudTrail enabled. We mentioned CloudTrail a couple of times. It's the way to track activity of API calls on the platform. We'll talk a little bit more about it later in the presentation. You can also keep track of if RDS instances have backups, or if the MFA for the root account has been set up or it has been removed. We also have things like Amazon GuardDuty. Amazon GuardDuty is our threat detection service that provides continuous monitoring of the environment. It goes beyond the VPC. It actually can track API calls behavior in the VPC, what's the communication between accounts, and it helps you to identify if there's anything that could have been compromised, provide the evidence, and then for you to take action on that. So how does Amazon Guard is doing that? Well, the first thing is to enable it, and we're very proud on how easy it is to enable it. It just boils down to a checkbox in the AWS console, and once you have checked that one, you immediately start getting information from it. There are no sensors or agents to deploy. Once it has been enabled, it takes advantage of its unique position to collect information from things like Cloudtrail logs for API calls, VPC flow logs for network activity into the VPC context, or DNS query logs. It collects and aggregates all of this information and uses threat intelligence feeds from partners like Proofpoint and CrowdStrike to correlate this information and provide highly valuable, highly accurate findings by creating intelligent threat detection. This means that it's using also a series of signature-based detection systems for known attacks, and it's also covering unknown attacks by having a behavioral element by using machine learning. Once you have a finding, you can also automate taking action by using things like Lambda to, for example, shut down an EC2 instance that is misbehaving. As a natural companion, we announced at the last event something that we call AWS Security Hub. And this is because we listened to our customers when they said, we want to have a single pane of glass to deal with security findings. Part of the problem that we see is that security findings come from a series of different tools. All of these can be very noisy environments with many findings that use a different scale. And it's very hard to find the single source of truth for this information. And that's what Security Hub is trying to do, is trying to collate all of this security finding information, standardize it in something that we call the Amazon finding format. So analysis can be done and try to track what's really important for the security of our environment. So what it will do is that once it's enabled, what it does is that once it's enabled, it will get information directly from Amazon Guard or from services like Amazon Macie that tracks sensitive data and stored in S3, or Amazon Inspector for vulnerability management, or even from third-party solutions that have been pre-integrated with Security Hub. Once you have all of this information in a standardized way, it's easier for security analysts to understand what insights are important. Maybe there is a specific asset, maybe an EC2 instance, that has a high number of findings, and by solving that, they are becoming much more effective in solving these problems and rising the security profile of the of the account. Or maybe there is a specific AMI image that is being used across the board that has the same problem, and that's multiplying the number of findings that you have. As in the same way as Guard Duty, you can automatically take action. Perhaps when you have a specific set of findings, you want to create a ticket so the specific responsible teams can take action. You can automate that by using a combination of Security Hub plus CloudWatch events and Lambda. We'll see an example of that later. Of course, compliance, we want to make it easier for our customers to remain compliant to what is important for them. At launch, we are launching with the Center of Internet for Security recommendations for the account configuration. We will keep adding more security compliance checks. This makes use of AWS config rules, so you can also have that concentrated view for compliance. As well, we have another option called AWS Trusted Advisor. This collects the experience of many of our operational reviews, and it's not only focused on security, it also focuses on cost optimization, fault tolerance, performance, and it helps to detect. It can have another extra check for specific open ports. Maybe if Cloudtrail logging has been disabled, it will help you to identify if MFA is enabled for IAM users, or maybe if your password policy has not been set up. As we move down to logging and auditing, and we started by saying that we provide visibility like never before, is because if you think about interactions with the AWS platform, this is done mostly through API calls. And AWS CloudTrail is the service that we have to record these API calls. And that means that in a single place, you can have a clear track of who, what principal did what actions, when did this happen, and from where. In this case, we're thinking about IP addresses. We can automate actions based on those findings or based on those records, and then we can also store them and keep them. It will collect information from different regions and collect them into a single place. We also have a solution called CloudWatch that will help automate many of those points. For customers that would like to continue using solutions that they have used before, we have out-of-the-box integration with log analysis tools like Adler Logic, Sumo Logic, and Splunk. So, talking again about CloudTrail, it will help us to capture this information, store it for the long term, and act on it. We can create as many copies as we want, review it, and make sure that this information cannot be modified by any other principal in the platform. With Amazon CloudWatch, it's a series of services that work together. With Amazon CloudWatch logs, we can aggregate logs perhaps coming from CloudTrail, but we can also collect the logs that are being created as part of EC2 instances or maybe databases. As we aggregate these, we can start to track metrics with CloudWatch metrics and understand how these are behaving across time. We can also query this information by using a highly scalable service called CloudWatch Insights that has its own language to query this information and go through huge amount of information in a very short amount of time. And of course, if we want to have visualization, we have something that is called CloudWatch Dashboards, where we can track the behavior of these metrics in a visual friendly way. Going back to the VPC and the networking environment, we can also understand and get information from the traffic that is flowing through that. It's agentless, it's available by a simple configuration change, and it will help you to understand if there is a communication between an instance and another one, and what was the result of that communication, if it was accepted or rejected. This is similar to typical flow logs. Content won't be available. It's only the trace of the communication. This can be particularly helpful if you know that specific instances shouldn't be communicating. If you see activity on that side, you know that either something went wrong. Maybe there is an agent doing something that it's not supposed to do, or maybe there was a configuration that now can be detected and be traced back. When we talk about infrastructure security, then we need to talk about the segregation and isolation that this provides. By using things like subnets, we can create routes between VPCs. We can also connect to our on-premises installations by using something like Direct Connect, or control communications only to specific ports by using things like security groups or network access control lists. If we want to establish communication with other VPCs that may be not even in our own AWS account, but maybe with a third party, we can use things like private link to create a direct connection that doesn't need to traverse the public network. In the same way as private link, we have something that is called Amazon VPC endpoints. And this is for cases where you want to access these services that don't live in the context of a VPC, but you also don't want to open internet connectivity to these EC2 instances. In this case, you can use VPC endpoints that provide a direct way for these services to communicate with services outside the VPC. You can think of a way of accessing and locking as S3 bucket to a specific VPC and access the information directly from there. As we move a little bit more to the edge, we need to talk about DDoS protection. When we have distributed denial of service, we have a service called AWS Shield that it's always on and helps to protect against this type of attacks. For those customers that need extra visibility and extra protection in these cases, we offer something that is called AWS Shield Advanced. Let's look a little bit more about what these different services do. So if we talk about AWS Shield Standard, we're talking about a service that is always on, cannot be turned off, and it offers protection for attacks that are undergoing to the layer 3 and layer 4. These are the most common type of attacks and are volumetric attacks. Things like SIM floods, UDP floods, all of these get automatically dealt with by AWS Shield Standard. For those more difficult to distinguish application layer type of attacks in the context of DDoS, you can use AWS WAF that will offer protection for your web applications. It offers a flexible rule language, and it allows you to create specific rules to deal with this type of attack. When we move to Shield Advanced, what we offer is the same protection as Shield Standard plus the WAF, but it also offers a baselining and anomaly detection. It offers access to a specific team that is in charge of dealing with this type of attacks, with all the expertise that the DRT team offers, and it can help to configure adequately the WAF service to deal with this type of attacks. As we move to now inside the VPC, you can use Amazon Inspector as a vulnerability assessment service. It has been created with DevOps in mind by integrating with CI/CD tools. It also supports static and dynamic rules packages and generates findings that are standardized and can help you to prioritize what findings are more important than others. There are two principal types of scans. One is the network reachability scan, that it helps to understand if there is a specific path between a specific EC2 instance and a way to connect to the VPC. Either if it's coming from the internet, maybe there is a path coming from your on-premises direct connect or VPN connection to the VPC. It will help you to understand if there is a path that can be traversed there. And this is particularly helpful to understand if there are VPC misconfigurations or things that you were expected to be not reachable from a specific place are being reachable. Once you combine this with host assessments, you can understand not only if there is a path to reach that EC2 instance, but also if there is a service, a specific service behind it. And not only that, if that service is also vulnerable to known vulnerabilities. By combining these two types of assessments, you have a full view of what can happen. How you can use Amazon Inspector? Well, it's easy to configure. You just need to define a series of tags that will comprise the scope. You need to select the run and run the assessment, and findings will be generated once this is over. And then you can take action based on the findings, whether it's to send this information to a SIEM, create a report of the state of security for that instance, or directly raise a ticket for further investigation. In the case of network reachability scan, the first two steps is a single one-click launch. You might be familiar with this, but if you're not, I wanted to communicate to you that before we used to require permission for performing penetration tests or security assessments on AWS infrastructure. So I'm happy to communicate that effectively immediately, AWS customers are welcome to carry out security assessments or penetration tests against their AWS infrastructure without requiring prior authorization or approval. This is only applicable for the 8 services listed here, which will cover most of the cases. In the case of CloudFront, there are still some restrictions, so please look at the policy. But I think this is a this might be a welcome news. As before, it was always required to ask for authorization, and it was well, it was not ideal for some cases. Talk about data privacy and encryption. When we talk about encryption in transit, we talk about things like TLS connections, maybe connectivity to the VPC or an instance by using VPNs, or directly to the instance using Secure Shell. We also talk about encryption at rest. In that case, we can talk at different levels. It can be either that encryption is done at the object level, maybe directly at the database, or perhaps at the disk level. In here, we have solutions like AWS Certificate Manager that helps to create and manage through the whole life cycle certificates. It supports domain validation through email, and it releases our customers from having to worry about expired certificates, as this is done automatically. For encryption at rest, we offer mainly two services. One is AWS Cloud HSM, which is a hardware security model deployed directly on the cloud, and the other service is AWS Key Management Service, or KMS, which is highly integrated with AWS services, and it provides an easy way to encrypt the information using symmetric keys. Let's look a little bit more deeply into them. So AWS KMS is a managed service that simplifies the creation and management of keys. It's integrated with AWS services directly. Customers have control over the keys, which is by using something that we call CMKs, Customer Managed Keys. It uses AES 256 symmetric keys to protect the information, and it uses something that is called envelope encryption to provide highly scalable encryption at the cloud scale. It is integrated with CloudTrail, so it provides that auditability and visibility that it's highly desirable in an encryption system. When we talk about AWS Cloud HSM, we're talking about a dedicated HSM. It's a single-tenant hardware security model that is deployed on AWS infrastructure. Keys are only accessible to and controlled by customers. It is deployed in the context of an Amazon VPC. It offers FIPS 142 Level 3 certification, and this is for those highly regulated workloads that require this, that have this as a requirement. Typical use cases go from electronic invoicing, maybe TDE, which is file-level encryption for databases. It can be also used directly for custom encryption for your applications. Finally, we have incident response. And here we will use an example coming for Amazon Guard Duty. We will use Amazon Guard Duty to detect something. We already discussed about the service. In this case, let's think that there is a finding that is detecting that there is crypto mining activity inside one of the EC2 instances that have been deployed in the VPC. Once this has been detected by using CloudWatch events, the finding gets sent to CloudWatch, and by using CloudWatch events, an action can get triggered automatically. The action in this case will be executed by Lambda. Lambda is our serverless compute service. And what we will do is that we can create a function that can take any action. In the case of our finding that it's a crypto mining activity in an EC2 instance, we can decide to isolate that EC2 instance or terminate it and notify automatically one of our security teams to take a look and determine what happened there. We know that many of our customers work with many of our partners, and that they have either preferred security solutions that they would like to continue using as they move and they start with their journey in the cloud. So we have one of the largest security partners and solutions ecosystem, whether it's for monitoring infrastructure like with Alert Logic, or maybe if you have an identity provider that helps you to control in a single sign-on way access to your assets, you can also use it here. Or maybe something that is important for you is the auditability capabilities that you have, so you can continue using your vulnerability and management solution directly in the cloud. Or perhaps you're already working with one of our logging and monitoring partners like Sumo Logic or Splunk. You can continue sending information to them, and it's all completely integrated. Finally, I want to leave you with this message. Hopefully, this is not the first time that you have heard, and if it is, let me remind you that at AWS, security is job zero, or we also refer to it as priority number one. AWS has been designed for security, and we offer a continuously monitored environment and the tools for you to continuously monitor your own environment as well. It provides highly automated solutions that are highly available, and it's highly accredited by using by our compliance programs. With that, that's it for the slide deck. Let's start with the questions and answers section. Just give me a second. Okay. So the first question is how does IAM integrate with directory service, if at all? So IAM can integrate with the directory service in the control plane. So talking about directory service in the context of AWS directory services, you will use IAM to set the permissions for directory services to be created and managed and controlled. You can also have a circular integration in that sense, that if you want to use the managed Microsoft AD solution, you can also deploy AD federated services and use that to control authentication into your AWS environment. Other question I have is the Security Hub able to serve several different accounts? So automatically, it will collect the information for the services in the region and then the account. The idea is to have it integrated with AWS organizations to collect the information from several accounts. So yeah, I would say that's supported. We currently don't have source code scanning tools as part of AWS. There are partners that can offer that solution, but there is no AWS service that can do that. So are all AWS security features available in all regions? So there are different regions have different services available. The focus or the idea is to have parity between all of them in the interest of time. There is a specific table that is services in scope that published in our portal where you can access this information. So another question that we have is how AWS Elastic Beanstalk is supported into AWS security services. It's pretty much supported. It has its own security features, but AWS Beanstalk is deployed using IAM. It's deployed into the context of a VPC, So you will have the same features there to control security groups, VPC flow logs to understand the traffic. You have all of these services features available there. So we have a question on how does customer completely rely on AWS? Is data secure with AWS for when there is sensitive information? If they need to follow something like HIPAA compliance for healthcare patient records? So in this case, HIPAA is one of the compliance regulations that we comply with. There is an addendum that needs to be signed, as there are some services that are HIPAA approved. So in order to be, you need to sign the agreement and make sure that you're using those services that are part of the agreement that are HIPAA compliant. These are the ones that are available or have been approved to hold personal health information. So our question is, does AWS have a CASB cloud access service brokering offering? We don't have one at the moment, but if there's interest, you never know. Okay. So there is a series of questions around IPv6. So IPv6 is supported. There are still things that are being worked to have full features on IPv6. For example, you cannot have mixed VPC configuration for IPv4 and IPv6. I will keep an eye open as things will get interesting with new deployments in that area. And I think we are now out of time. Thanks a lot for joining. I hope that you found that this session useful, and well, hope to see you the next time. Thanks.